So I decided to go right into the LaFerrari build right after I did the product review. The only thing you guys really missed was basically me removing the wheels, the gearboxes, the seat, steering wheel, the windshield, and the carpet. The car is pretty much still together. As you can see, I have it flipped upside down on the stand. So the first thing we'll need to do is remove both cover panels on the front and the rear of the LaFerrari. So let's get started on that. Now with the panels off and the undercarriage exposed, you could actually see what screws we need to remove in the front and rear to get down to business. Now, one thing that we need to do before we actually remove the steering mechanism is to kind of pop the wheel back on and take a quick measurement of how much spacing we're gonna, or basically how low we're gonna be lowering it before it actually touches something. So having the wheel on there actually shows the amount of wheel gap or spacing you have, and it will give you an idea using a tape measure how much or how low we're gonna go with it. This is looking like around 1.25 inches, so we're probably gonna do a little bit less than 1.25 inches just to give ourselves a little wiggle room as far as play without it actually touching once weight goes in it or once it's turning. Now I actually went back to take the measurement just to show you guys, but usually this measurement will be taken while the car has all 4 wheels on and is upright standing. So it'll be these here, 1, 2, 3 on both sides, and first thing we have to do is just basically get this piece out. Now that we have the steering mechanism off, we go ahead and as you'll see, it's just these plastic pieces that are basically deciding how high the car is. I'm gonna focus on the front right now since that's the hardest part. The rear is fairly easy and self-explanatory, but the front is where the tricky part is. So we're gonna have to remove this piece here, which just pops out, and I'll put that with this, and from here I'll be measuring and marking these pieces on both sides because we're going to make a cut, and the point of that is to basically bring here down more. Now that everything is off, we could actually get into the measuring. Now we know that we're going to go down a little under 1.25 inches or so. So what you want to do is you want to take your tape measure and put it about here and kind of mark that spot right here. Let me show you. Okay, so once you've made your mark on both sides, now you kind of come back in and go around the whole thing. The only reason why I made a mark here is because this part is the only important part to me as far as getting this piece, knowing how far to come down with it. This is kind of, you know, my go-to line as far as how far I'm going to lower it without going too low. As far as the rest of the marks going around it, it's really not as important, but you do want to kind of keep along with this little shelf here. So it'll be basically a line that's going to go from here, you know, around into this, and then come all the way back around. You know, we could go up over this, no problem. But the main thing is to keep this line here lined up with this line, and then after that, you know, you could be as crooked as you want. I wouldn't recommend being crooked on purpose, but try to be straight as far as that. But your measurement definitely has to be perfect from here to here, or on point from here to here. And those are our lines that we are going to be cutting along. However, it actually came to me that maybe I should change up one of these lines on the inside. I think it will work out better in the end if I were to come up with this side a little further and then go across. And there's a reasoning behind that you will see later on, but let's just say it's for added stability. So do the same thing on this side, kind of just go up and over, and then just tie it in. So hopefully I didn't confuse you guys too much, but it will work out better in the end, trust me. And now we heat with the heat gun, and then we cut. If you don't have a heat gun, then you could muscle it out. I wouldn't recommend it though. It's better if you kind of heat up the plastic to make it softer, and it'll be easier to cut through. Once again, I'll be using a blade, which is my weapon of choice. Now there's two things I want to mention before you actually cut. The first is, kids, don't try this at home. And the second is, try to hold the blade. If you're using a blade, try to hold it in a way where it's not towards any body part, and hold it in a way where you feel like you have control. So as you'll see, I hold it in certain ways where I feel like I have more control. If I don't feel comfortable, I'll switch my position and, you know, try to get a more comfortable position to cut. So it's very important when working with the blade to try to keep it away from any moving or any body part period as much as possible. When I'm heating the material, different heat guns operate at different heat ranges. Some just have one speed, some have, you know, multiple speeds. Mine in particular has two speeds, a low speed and a high speed. I usually heat these plastic materials on the high speed level, and I keep it moving. I don't focus on any one spot. I just try to surround and keep it moving, and I do that for around 20 to 25 seconds, give or take. Each gun is different, so don't quote me on the time. You just have to kind of gauge it for yourself. Okay, so now we have our two pieces cut out. We have our two holes. By the way, be careful when you're cutting to not hit any of these wires, because it's gonna suck splashing them back together. But yeah, here are your two holes. Here is the revised cut lines that I did instead of cutting it down here. And this next part is gonna kind of suck because now you have to get this to fit in here on both sides. So that's the next step. Now once you have them in, you know, you could just kind of sit them. Don't worry about them falling. They're not going to really go anywhere that you can't reach, unless you do something really crazy as far as moving the car around. But you can just kind of sit them in there on both sides. And the next step basically will be running screws in them to hold them in place of where you need them to be. These are the screws I'm going to be using to hold them in place. But don't worry, you could use basically any screws with like a pointy tip or a self-tapping screw. You know, that's maybe around a 1/2 inch in length that could, you know, penetrate the whole, you know, completely penetrate the plastic. You should be good with. And you know, if you don't have screws, you could always get some from your local hardware store. So I'll be drilling small holes all around the piece we cut, so we could run these screws in. And I'm going to be using 1/8 drill bit, so you can use a 1/8 or anything less. Not anything that's too big for the screws. You want to get something that the screws will still catch, because they are kind of self-tapping screws. So that's what I would recommend. Okay, so once you have gotten all 4 screws in on both sides, which I must tell you, it's really tricky, especially catching this back one with the angle that you have to put the drill. It's a real pain in the butt. Also, as you're screwing it, you got to try to keep this pulled more towards the front. It's hard to explain until you're actually doing it, but you have to kind of hold this with more pressure towards the front than, you know, the rear, to kind of keep that tilt. And basically looking at the way these edges look, I try to line up this piece, you know, sit it even here on both sides to kind of, you know, this is where I was gauging my height from during the original measurement with the tape. So that's where I set it at. And as you can see also, the reason I kept this, you know, instead of cutting it down here, I kept this is to run a screw on the inside. If I had cut that, we wouldn't have been able to do that to help stabilize it on the inside also. So next, we're gonna test fit our steering mechanism. Let's put this little piece back in. Pop that. All right, there you go. It's kind of, you know, a little more difficult to do it with one hand because I'm trying to hold the camera. And then we're gonna test fit this. Now we're gonna have to take this piece off because what we're really trying to see is our height. So right now, so let's go ahead and take that off. And you could do that by simply removing these 2 end screws. Now I kind of just stick the screws back in, each one of them, just to know where they are, because screws tend to, you know, grow legs and walk away, and you can lose track of them really quick. So I try to either keep them in the part or stick them back in the holes once I remove them. You know, because putting them in like a, you know, a little cup or whatever, some screws are different lengths or, you know, width, and you don't want to get them crossed or mixed up. Once you have the wheels on both sides, you could go ahead and retighten these screws. You'll need to tighten those screws back in so everything sits the way it's supposed to sit, and you'll have the best idea of, you know, your spacing and how low your car really is. As you can see, it actually sat pretty well. On this side, you know, a little bit of turning. You are going to get a little bit of hit down here. This is where the door opening mechanism is. So, but it's still enough turning clearance for the car to turn. this side is good. However, this side, it seems to be a little more back this way than forward. So we're gonna have to adjust that because this one doesn't have as much turning clearance as the other side does. So to adjust that, what we're gonna do is we're gonna go back here and remove that screw, kind of tilt, kind of pull this up more and re-drill a hole. So it will kind of tilt a little bit more forward. Okay, so I went ahead and made the correction on this side. Now if you take a look, we have, you know, full turning on both sides with no scraping or anything like that. And what I ended up doing was I went in and I took out this screw and I took out this screw and kind of tilted it forward and re-drilled the hole on both sides. So just kind of, you know, tilted it forward a little bit, re-drilled this hole, so this hole on the inside is higher, and on this side this hole is lower, so it will tilt more forward. And now, you know, it matches with the other side. And this is actually one of the reasons why I was saying, as you're drilling it, to try to keep it more forward as you're drilling the holes, because if it tilts, you know, more backwards, it's going to bring the wheel too close to the backside of the wheel well, where it was scrubbed, and it's not going to be centered, and you're gonna, you know, everything is going to go wrong. But it's an easy correction, so that's the best part about it. So once you have both front wheels situated, as far as the clearance is concerned, now at this point you could add more screws for additional stability. Personally, I go in with the hot glue gun and I run it all around the edges that's, you know, touching or close to be touching. Other than that, it's just gonna drop right in. But I kind of will go around, you know, not here and here, but around everywhere else where it's pretty close, and that helps hold it in place. However, I do leave the screws in there also. The screws will remain for additional stability and strength. And this is what it looks like once I've hot glued, I should say, around the perimeter of the cut we made. Like I said before, the screws will remain for additional strength and stability. You don't necessarily have to glue it. You could add more screws for additional strength if you don't have a glue gun or any kind of glue to use like that. You could also use, you know, some kind of bonding agent like panel bond or plastic welder, whatever you have. Something that could bond the plastic and hold it in place. So first we're going to put this piece back in. It's very important. Just kind of pop that back into place. And then we put our two steering pieces back on. Whoops. Okay, and now that we have our all our pieces back on, and make sure this piece goes back on. This is very important also as far as stability. That helps to keep these two things from flexing outwards from each other, because if it does, then your car is going to start cambering, and if you're not looking for camber, then you might want to not forget to put that back in. Next, we will be reinstalling our steering shaft. Now, if you remember at the beginning, the car originally comes with the shaft facing this way with this black piece underneath. Now that we've lowered the car, we're gonna have to actually flip this so the black piece is up top, and kind of put it on that way. So let me go ahead and fasten that for you. And there you have it. We added the screws back on. This piece is flipped upright, and you have just enough play that it's not touching this little beam right here. And there you go, uninterrupted turning. So I'm gonna go ahead and put these wheels back on and check our clearances once more. There we go. So I'm going to turn this left and right, and we take a look at our turning clearances, and everything looks good. Wheels spinning, no scrubbing. Turn it the other way. No scrubbing. And now we're gonna just go ahead and replace our covering. Of course, I'm gonna have to remove the wheels again to put the covering back on. But I do need to address the covering now, because now that it's lower, and there is, you know, less gap around here, we might have to cut into the covering a little bit for clearance as far as rubbing is concerned. So I went ahead and I replaced the plastic covering, and I also went ahead and put the wheels on, and I'm going to show you what I'm talking about as far as it hitting a little bit as far as the scrubbing. That we're gonna have to actually take a little piece out just to stop the wheel from rubbing that plastic covering. With the covering on now, and the wheel on, you know, as you can see, it turns fairly easy. But when it goes to turn this way, you hear that? You're gonna get a little bit of rub. Now, in some cases, in some cars where you lower, you know, that's low life, you know, you deal with it. But if it could be avoided, why not? So what I'm gonna do is take out a little piece right here that's hitting to kind of get that to go away. Okay, now with the wheel off, you can see better where I'll be making my cut, which honestly, the only piece that's really touching is this little surface right here. So I'm probably gonna end up cutting from here and just taking out this little piece right there. So now that these pieces are cut out, let's go ahead and test our wheel clearances. So I already put that wheel on. I'm gonna go ahead and grab this one and pop that one back on. Let's test our, there you go, no rubbing, perfect. And on the other side, perfect. And that, my friends, is how you lower the front of the licensed LaFerrari by Rostar. Now let's move on to the rear.